Hello, and welcome to the Expression series of podcasts as part of the Scottish Mental Health Arts and Film Festival with me, Nicole Bell. This series examines different forms of artistic expression and the contribution they make to the representation and discussion of mental health. Today we'll be examining comedy and its role as a platform for discussing and improving mental health. I'm joined by two comedians, Michael Grieve from Fife and Hannah Rodgers from the US. Both are part of improv comedy troupe Blind Mirth, who've just returned from an extremely successful run at the Edinburgh Fringe, congratulations, and who, on top of improv, have both gone on to perform sketches and stand-up. Thank you both for joining us. The first thing I want to ask you today is how you got into comedy in the first place.
I first got into comedy when, essentially what was happening, I was having a really bad day and found out that there was a improv comedy workshop going on. And I sort of was just in the right place at the right time and went along and had a great couple of hours. Then the next week I got an email from the same group, Blind Mirth, and they were having another workshop. And I, again, was in the right place, right time, was having a bad day, thought I might as well go. It'll cheer me up. And I went to the next workshop. And if you repeat that for about 3 stages of auditions, I ended up in a group with matching jackets and then went on to do sketch and stand-up. So a series of small accidents led me into comedy, I suppose is the way to say it.
I actually had a background in musical theater, and it's in like scrolling through emails for sort of artistic opportunities. I happened to get an invite to give improv a try, and I was like, well, why not? And it turned out to be a series of workshops where I decided to audition the following year out of just a complete accident as well. I was required to audition for something in a class, and I was just like, why not? I've already done their workshops, and I got in. And that was my first troupe. Now I'm in Blind Mirth, with the matching jackets. But that was how it was also oddly enough small accidents.
I'm really sad you didn't come today in matching jackets. That would have been nice.
We should have coordinated. Sorry.
Hey, but what? We are wearing matching jackets.
But we did bring our matching musical bow ties.
Yes.
But there's too high pitched for humans to hear.
Yeah.
And that explains
Musical dog bow ties.
So now that we've covered kind of how you got into comedy, I'd like to ask you about how your involvement in comedy has improved or what it's done for your own mental health.
God, it's really helped. Especially with improv being the kind of first comedy that I ever did and being the thing that I've done most. Improv is all about teaching you to accept whatever happens and run with it. The whole motto of the entire thing is yes and. So it's about whatever your scene partner does on stage, you accept it and you take it and you go, yes, that's great, that's brilliant, let's go with it. So that philosophy over time slowly, I think, seeps into your life a little bit and has definitely made me someone who worries less and thinks about things less. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, actually, thinking about things like I worry about things less. I mull things over less. Yeah. It's more of a I feel it and go with it.
I think I always found like performing arts in general to be quite soothing. Like the ability to be, yourself in one moment and then, take the stage and become someone else, I always found was quite relaxing. I mean, stressful to a point, obviously, but with my old troupe especially, I know we always used to work on a concept of making your scene partner look good. So your role on stage was not to make jokes or was not to be funny, but to make your scene partner funny. And the best improvisers in that group were people who, you could walk on stage as a dog walker and they could make you feel like the funniest person in the world. And that was something that was really, really unique to like the best of them. And I think that kind of sort of seeped into my everyday life and the way that I deal with my own mental health and the way that I deal with other people is trying to make, obviously, trying to make, people around you feel better is a good task to bring upon yourself, but also just learning to trust someone in a scene, just learning to rely on somebody. If you come in with a mistake, having that person be like, okay, well, you know what, we're gonna roll with it, we're gonna make something positive out of that, and being able to rely on people around you to help you do that is, I think, it just absolutely invaluable for not just comedy but like life.
And I think that's something as well, like when everyone on stage is trusting each other and kind of vibing like that, the audience really feel it and they kind of get pulled into that vibe, and it makes everyone in the room feel better, and when they're having a good time you feel better, and when you feel better they're having a better time, and it just sort of is a massive feedback loop. But when it's working, it goes so well. And just it's the biggest rush of endorphins.
and the idea that really with good improv nothing you do can really truly mess something up. Like if you come in and you like do make a legitimate mistake, if the audience is there with you, they're sort of, you know, on the ride, and your scene partner's like, oh yeah, all right, well that's part of the story now, then that becomes part of the joke. So taking that in your own mental health, you make mistakes, but you know, making it part of the joke, making it, you know, being able to keep it as it is instead of kind of like pushing it to the side, because you obviously can't do that in front of the audience.
No.
You'd be like, oh, take two, like no, like that's not the way improv works.
And even for like outside of improv, when you're talking about sketch and stand-up, it's really nice to like take the time to sit and construct these shapes of jokes and work towards these things and play with timing and quite everything you're doing, and really hone in the ideas to then take that to an audience and they laugh at it, hopefully. That's the biggest thing.
It's a feeling like no other to spend a long time working on a single laugh, but then getting the laugh.
It's like they're two sides of a very similar coin.
Yeah.
No, wait, they're two sides of the same coin.
The same,
not two sides
they're
of different
very
coins.
yeah.
That would be another story altogether. That's just two coins.
I guess as well, feeling like you have a key into other people's positive well-being when you kind of personally inform other people.
There's always like you know, you can do a show or a stand-up or a sketch, and you can finish that thing and be like, oh man, like that was horrible, oh I didn't feel good about that at all, and then have somebody come and be like, I was having a really terrible day and I saw that and it made me laugh, and that made my day so much better. And suddenly, like, even though you feel like, you know, you're putting it in on yourself that the show was bad and you're blaming yourself for, you know, the show not, or the sketch not going the way that you wanted it to, knowing that you made someone's day is very validating. Like it kind of almost brings you out of a hole or a slump if you're in one.
And also in terms of having that hand in other people's mental health, because comedy is so much about kind of putting this funny thought in somebody else's head and making them feel the same thing for a moment. It sort of bridges that gap between you and other people in a way that if you're in Hamlet and you're doing To Be or Not to Be, this Don Patterson has an aphorism, and it's the silence of the unbearably moved and the terminably bored are indistinguishable.
No, really though.
In comedy, you just get this sudden moment of like, no, they get it and I get it, and everyone in the room is on the same page here, and it's brilliant.
Nobody holds their breath with laughter. like you know immediately when it's going well.
You know you're doing really well if they cannot breathe. But...
Yeah.
So now that we've spoken about the relationship between comedy and mental health for you both personally, what do you think the wider implications are of comedy and mental health?
Well, comedy is a great thing for discussing mental health in a lot of ways, because it allows you to get closer to it in a way that you can't with more serious quote-unquote stuff, because people don't have these barriers up with comedy.
There's a lot of intimidation when it comes to just sitting down and having a serious talk about something, you know, as personal as one's mental health. And that's something that I think comedy is good at battling fear in all ranges. It can battle stigma against, you know, things like mental health. It can battle, you know, terrorism. Like it's the kind of thing, like the only power that something has is when you are afraid of it. And I think one of the worst things that we can do with mental health is almost take it too seriously. What that does is people who have mental health problems then feel almost almost shut out from a world that's almost expecting them to come at it from a very, very specific angle, but allowing them to open it up and to make it something that they themselves don't necessarily need to find, you know, life ruining. Like there is something to be said about, you know, being able to laugh at one's own problems. And I know people say that that's, you know, a really great quality to have, is being able to laugh at your own mistakes. But to be able to laugh at your own mental health problems is I would say probably even more valuable.
Would you say I think it's like a context thing, whereas a lot of comedy comes from taking something and putting it in another context, by taking this very hard thing to deal with and to speak about, and taking it into a context where it's not as difficult. It can be complex, but it's not as difficult, and it's not feared and stigmatized in the same way. By taking it into that context, you then change the thing itself, and it means when you take it back to the more serious side, there's more doors open. There are more ways
yeah.
of
There's
thinking
a
about
lot more of an understanding. You know, you take it from your head and you put it into real life. And people who've never experienced anything like that before, you know, they find themselves laughing. But also because they've had that moment that you were talking about, like where everybody's thinking on the same page, because they've experienced what that's like. You know, they're never going to look at that the same again. They've almost had an epiphany along with you, and that's that. I mean, that's invaluable. You know, you don't get that from you know reading a book about, you know, various kinds of problems. Like,
I suppose this is where the kind of, because sketch and stand up, you get to sit down and think about it and plan it out. I think that's where it comes in, because you get to really decide how these things are shaped. Whereas in improv, the fun is, I think, more escapist. It's more about escaping your own mind, going into somewhere else, creating something in the moment and sharing it with other people. With something that you're writing down, you get this chance to really decide how you're going to make this thing look, and then share that. And they both kind of have good points. But they do slightly different things, I think, in terms of discussing issues.
Yeah, like with comedy or with stand-up comedy and sketch comedy, it's almost like the audience is following like a brainwave. Whereas with improv, they're much more part of the creation process. And in that sense, you know, being part of the creation process versus sort of just being along for the ride is they almost reach the mental wavelength at different times. It's really hard, you know, when somebody's so focused on, you know, doing a scene or doing creating a character or something in improv. It's much different to get people online with a method of thinking, more along with, I guess, the joke. I'm trying to put into words what I'm trying to get to. That's
in the way that, like, when you're writing something down, you can make the kind of thought processes of a mental health.
You can see ahead of time where people's thoughts are going to follow. Whereas with improv, you just kind of happens. And sometimes it's relevant and sometimes it's not. But yeah.
With sort of on that note of like thinking about where other people's thoughts are going to go as you do a routine or as you do a sketch, it's really interesting because as a person writing that down and as somebody performing that, you then get to, I think it forces you to look at things through other people's eyes as well, which does that sort of bridging minds thing. It's a big thing with comedy in a way that because people put their barriers down when they laugh. They don't have this like, oh, I'm gonna look stupid, or I'm gonna, like, I don't want to think this. Or
it's also like a contagious thing, because I think people put their barriers down when other people laugh. Like there's so much to be said about, you know, seeing a funny play in an audience where no one is laughing, and seeing a funny play in an audience where everyone is laughing, and
or seeing an unfunny play in an audience where everyone's laughing is way more fun.
So it's way better. Oh, it's so much better. No, exactly though, and I think that you know, as somebody, you know, who does comedy, you know. That means a lot for the comedian who potentially does mental health. Your barriers, your insecurities come crashing down when you're bringing joy to the lives of others. And you know, in watching people laugh at things that you are saying to be funny. You know, you're not only is your goal being realized, but you're also feeling like, oh my gosh, these people are connecting with me in a way that maybe nobody has before.
So it kind of reduces feelings of isolation.
Oh yeah,
with your own issues.
That might also help the fact that a lot of comedy happens in pubs as well. So all the barriers are done. Nothing is left remaining.
So what about the difference between when you're performing a stand-up routine and when you're performing as part of your improv group, in terms of the difference mentally of that experience of knowing you're up there on your own, or knowing you have your friends or your kind of co-performers there to support you?
Stand-up is the most terrifying thing until you have had one laugh.
Yes,
From the walk up to the microphone and standing there and doing the first little bit is the worst thing in the world. As soon as they laugh and you kind of start riding that wave, it's fine. For me, improv, I almost don't think about going on stage with improv. I just kind of run on stage with lots of friends behind me and just see what happens.
It's a go for it mentality.
Yeah, and it's almost like and I'm not as experienced as Mike, so like he's probably out of the yeah. Don't let that go to your head. He's probably out of the anxiety thing. Like, I do still get some anxiety about going on stage and performing, and I'll probably get that for the rest of my life. But there is something to be said though about, you know, in a stand-up routine where you're kind of like, okay, I have these jokes. These are the moments where I am expecting to get a laugh. And like, it's so terrifying, especially because if you get to your first moment and there's nothing, and you're like, oh no, what have I done?
At least in improv, you're not expecting anything.
No. With improv, the audience, especially people who've seen improv before, the audience are coming in with this sort of thought of, well, this could be great, but this also could be really, really bad.
So
but it's entirely
pressure.
made up. Yeah, it's not like we thought it was good before we said it. We had no idea what was coming
I
out.
find that interesting, your point about being like nervous before shows. So I think that I think there are definitely two types of people that I've met who do improv comedy. There are the people who are naturally sort of yes and go for it, see what happens kind of people, and they gravitate towards improv because that's just how they think. And then there are people who are natural worriers and are very anxious people who need the counterbalance to get out of that for a bit and sort of train them in the other direction to pull them into a...
And that's why I'm actually really thankful that I was brought in Happy Gas, my old troupe, because their method of, you are on the stage for your scene partner, sort of almost kind of whacked the anticipation and the anxiety out of me. Because if you're on stage with somebody and and they give you a look like you can't look back at them with the same oh no kind of feeling, because then you ruin it. It makes you feel more spontaneous, and I think that's I think that does wonders. I mean, that I'm not as anxious as when I first began. It gives you confidence that I don't think that stand-up does, because stand-up is something that gives you validation. You come in with these sort of set things that you're like, this is funny, this might be funny, I hope this is funny, this is gonna knock them out of their seats, and then
You hope.
you hope, yeah, no, exactly. And then when this happens, like when that happens, you're like, oh yeah, okay, that worked, that was fine. But improv, you just kind of go in and you're like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but gee, I sure hope it's funny. and then when people laugh, it's almost, I think it's so much more rewarding. Only because you've gotten there without any anticipation of what might be funny.
Stand-up does have that thing though as well, where because you've made it and because you have worked on it, it's that getting to share that is, even if it doesn't develop because it is a craft, because it is something that you hone in, it still gives you that sense of like, it's a different kind of creative.
They are much different
output.
art forms. Oh yeah, I mean they're both comedy, but they're so different in the way that you go about them and the way that you approach them.
But I feel like I suppose both of them are essentially just about going with the ideas that take you, because even if you have a routine and you're up on stage, there is still that thing where you
reading
can ride
the
the wave a bit, yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's like you can tell when an audience gets a joke. Like you can sit there and even if the people on stage have realized that there has suddenly become a joke, even whether it was intentional or not, suddenly there is a joke. You can watch it happen through the audience where maybe there's a pause and then yeah, and like so like there's definitely something about that there. And as a stand-up comedian, there's something to be said about people who can read that wave through the audience and know how to approach the next, the rest of their set.
I think that's one of actually the biggest things with comedy, is that because it is so inherently about making everyone in the room do the same mental leap at the same time, is that it teaches you a lot about how other people think and how it's different from the way you think. Because if you go, I would get this joke with X, Y, and Z information, but that audience actually laughed more if you only do X and Y. Yeah. Then you go like, oh, cool, I don't need to do this bit. I can make it quicker, funnier, and you sort of put together this picture of the general mind in a way that you don't, I think.
And as far as making it a platform, like I think that's part of it. Is that suddenly you're you're trying to make it this universal language, and of course and comedy will never be entirely universal. There's so many different ways of coming at things that make different people laugh, but
sometimes it's culturally specified as well.
Oh no, absolutely, so much, But being able to be up there and deliver a joke that maybe gets 95% of the people to laugh, suddenly that's 95% of the people who are rallying for you, who are on your side, who are they've made a connection for you, and sometimes the other 5 will be like, oh, I got it, but But
it's mostly just a big ego boost, isn't it?
I mean,
not at all.
No. We are humble comedians, Michael.
It's only an ego boost if you're good. No, it's not an ego boost if you're not.
No, but comedy doesn't work if it's just an ego boost. Because if it's an ego boost, it should be like you need to be on the same level as
Yeah,
everyone
yeah,
else,
yeah,
or
yeah.
else you're speaking down and you're lecturing and it doesn't work like that.
People who claim, you know, well my set was great, but the audience just didn't get it, are in my opinion not necessarily the best.
Well, that's not how comedy works.
No, comedy is something that should be understood by everyone. You are doing it for the sake of your audience. You are doing it for the sake of the people who are watching or who are listening or who are there to build the scene with you, and then by an extension you are there for you.
Yeah.
It's not a I'm here for me and therefore you must laugh like that. That's not the way it works.
Nobody wants to do a stand-up set in an empty room, right?
No, exactly. It's only validating if you've already sort of been validated by the audience.
Yeah.
And we have not very much time left at all. Are there any final thoughts you want to give? No?
Go see some comedy, it's good for you.
Go do some comedy, it's better for you.
SMHAFF themselves are actually doing some comedy shows, so there is some comedy on during the festival, so we'd definitely advise people to go along to that, especially after the advertisement from you two. So thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye. If this podcast has inspired you to engage with comedy, a workshop run by Universal Comedy will be running as part of the Scottish Mental Health Arts and Film Festival. This will take place on Tuesday the 20th of October in Paisley Arts Centre. Do check our website for further information. We hope to see you there.